Keegan. I work for a small boutique consultancy called Point of Care Partners. And I like to describe that we live at sort of the nexus of where policy and regulatory activity, people's strategic goals, and where they're trying to take their organization or try and get things done in their roadmaps, and technology, what is the actual technical enablement and reality out in the world, both in standards, but just in general. And we live in that space. And so I somehow managed to get myself involved in the very early days of, figuring out how payers and providers could come together to leverage FHIR to automate a lot of burdensome work that happens between those two organizations today. Industry, and we've developed about 15 implementation guides that are fit for purpose for things from prior authorization to quality measures and your HEDIS craziness of the archival work that we do today, to allowing payers and providers to share critical information about where they are in their contract period, their performance period, so that they can actually get the upside for their contracts. And when I think about sort of why somebody comes to do that work, it really is about the people that recognize that there's patterns that are happening and there are standards that don't exist yet, and how do I pick up and do this work? Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I worked in a different industry than healthcare for the first half of my career, and I think that's important because I saw sort of how moving to investing and sharing data and agreeing that the rails are common was an important step to getting to innovation, right? So if we think about what TEFCA gets us, I think it's a lot of it reduces, let's say TEFCA plus info blocking, right? The 21st century cures. It gets you removing what have been barriers from a business process relationship world out of the way of sort of improving how you can leverage technology, right? Because the technology has always been there. We should be able to share data freely with the right controls, right? Between trading partners or people that have rights to be able to get access to patient data. And I'll have to say, as somebody that doesn't live and breathe, this isn't my primary role in the industry. Yeah. I have thoroughly enjoyed, with popcorn in my hand, the online conversations that have been going on about the limitations we've seen, about the fact that we've stayed so narrow in treatment, and treatment itself has remained narrow, right? We've seen aberrant behavior happening because we have not addressed the fact that there needs to be data exchange between parties beyond just providers to other providers. I think that there's this really interesting conversation around information equity between payers and providers, and that's a lot of the work that I've done in industry, independent of my work at Da Vinci. It is critically important in order to build that trust that payers and providers have equal access to information, and that there's parity in value of the information that's being exchanged, and we can all agree that doesn't exist, right? I would lean into that a little bit more, though, and say I think it's important to consider the fact that we're creating a floor, right? And the floor is important. But I would say, as somebody that sits in the middle of all these conversations, right, and is involved in tons of FHIR communities, I sit on the Commonwealth board as an advisor. My team is involved now in CHI and trying to figure out how are we going to set up work groups. Our first mention of AI, nice work, way to weave it in. Thank you. Can't have a podcast interview without talking about AI. Go ahead. It's so fascinating. And I'm like old and grumpy about AI because I dealt with it back in the 90s. So I think that I think the point I want to make is that I think that in order to decide what that construct should be, there needs to be open communication. So this is me looking at my ONC friends. Like right now, the people that are making decisions about how TEFCA is going to go or not go are predominantly the existing players in network traffic in the US. Yep. And that does not include organizations that are payers. It does not include PBMs. It does not include intermediaries like population health and platform vendors. It includes the usual suspects that have been involved. And so I think that that's something that we need to figure out. How do we get more input beyond sort of public comment periods, right? very short public comment periods, to make sure that the conversation that's happening about these layers and the expansion of these use cases is really well represented by the people that are going to be impacted by it. And
there's a market opportunity for somebody who wants to be the QHIN payer, or the payer QHIN, right?
Stop. I'm a management consultant on a day-to-day basis. Do you not really understand that everyone that's in the QHIN market right now is trying to figure out how to monetize the payers? And so the payer is the customer for all of them?
Well, the payers are supposed to be part of the network, so I think that there needs to be a QHIN that onboards them and has their voice, because again, if you look at the people that are out there today, they're usual suspects, and we need some new players. So maybe there's somebody out that could be a voice for those payers and bring them into the network in another way. But
again, I'm in a weird seat at the table because I get to work with everybody on all the things, right? And I would tell you our friends at SureScripts are probably best positioned to leverage their existing relationships to the predominant payers in the country with their existing infrastructure, right? When I talk about sort of like what would be exciting is organizations that listen to this, understanding that they need to build more people like you and I to be out here doing this work for real, because this is, and you hear me say this all the time, a human-powered effort, right? It is literally going to be getting the first 5, the first 50, the first 500 of your interactions up and running in real time, whether through a TEFCA relationship and a QHIN or point to point with your different trading partners. That, to me, like making this work for real at scale is the most exciting thing that we could be doing. And, the regs are a help, but it really is about bodies and time and commitment to implement. And so that's what I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see that sort of Malcolm Gladwell tipping point start to occur.